Hello everyone, my name is Beyza Başdemir. I am studying master's degree in civil engineering at Ege University. Today I'm going to talk about identifying barriers to the implementation of sustainable construction. First, I should mention why I chose this topic. In the last decades, industrialization and urbanization have led to an increasing demand in the construction industry. Subsequently, this demand caused many environmental problems, which are due to harmful emissions and wastes produced and released into the environment along with the use of natural resources and energy throughout the building life cycle. Therefore, the term of sustainable construction has become crucial. Well, what is sustainable construction? By definition, sustainable construction is an industry that prevents the rapid depletion of resources, addresses the environmental and health problems caused by the buildings. However, there are numerous barriers on implementation of sustainable construction. In order to overcome these unseen barriers that hinder sustainable construction practices, the barriers need to be identified and prioritized so that correct actions can be taken by the stakeholders. This study aims at identifying and prioritizing potential barriers to the transition of sustainable construction in Turkey. In this study, two different multi-criteria decision-making methods, namely AHP and TOPSIS, were employed to prioritize potential barriers to the transition of sustainable construction. Firstly, AHP, one of the multi-criteria decision-making methods, was developed by SATI. This method allows multiple criteria to be considered by decision makers both quantitatively and qualitatively through pairwise comparisons and established a hierarchical relationship between criteria and alternatives in the system. There are three levels in AHP method. First, the model is structured hierarchically. Then the importance of the criteria and the decision alternatives according to each criterion are compared and evaluated. In the last level, the order of decision alternatives is determined by making priority synthesis. The second method, TOPSIS method, was developed by Wang and Yu. One of the multi-criteria decision-making, TOPSIS, which compares a set of alternatives by identifying weights for each criterion, normalizing values for each criterion. And it calculates the closest distance to the positive ideal solution and the farthest solution to the negative ideal solution between the alternatives with certain criteria. Case study. Within this context, 7 barriers and 3 criteria were identified through literature review, and a survey is designed to prioritize these barriers to the transition of sustainable construction. A total of 10 professionals were interviewed. All professionals are experienced in the construction industry, and most of them have more than 20 years of work experience. In this study, 3 different criteria, including social, technical, and legal, were taken into account the analysis. Next, 7 barriers were identified based on it through literature review. AHP and TOPSIS methods were used to prioritize the barriers. As you can see, there are 7 barriers and their description in the table. The first barrier is restrictions on the land selection, which focuses on contractors who can ignore land options that may have wind or solar potential in order to have maximum land and profits. The next barrier is design of the construction project, which focuses on the implementations required by regulations and technical limitations that can hinder sustainable construction practices. The other barrier is difficulties in selecting sustainable construction materials, which focuses on practitioners who usually have their own tendencies during material selection. The next barrier is high cost of sustainable construction materials, technologies, methods. By definition, sustainable construction practices might require more advanced materials, technologies, and methods which can have higher costs than traditional ones. The other barrier is customer demands. By definition, customers and contractors can prefer buildings built with traditional materials over those with sustainable materials. The next barrier is lack of awareness among managers, engineers, employees, and customers, which focus on existing information about sustainability is fragmented and mostly conceptual. The last barrier is lack of policies guidelines. By definition, sustainable construction practices require policies, legal frameworks, and supervision. The lack of policies results in low pressure to promote sustainable construction. Results of study: in order to obtain the weights of each criterion, AHP method was used. And in order to make the evaluation possible by the decision makers, a pairwise matrix is created, and that is carried out using a pairwise comparison scale, which ranges from 1 to 9. After creating a pairwise matrix, it was applied the 4 steps in the method. At the end of weights of each criterion. The pairwise comparison matrix and weights are given as seen in table. And in order to rank the barriers, TOPSIS method was used. The main purpose of this method is to determine the closest distance to the positive ideal solution and furthest solution to the negative ideal solution between the alternatives with criteria. The ranking of barriers are given as seen in table. And finally, discussions and conclusion. In the study, the rank of the barriers in descending order are found as follows: difficulties in selecting sustainable construction materials, customer demands, restrictions on the land selection, lack of awareness among managers, engineers, employees, and customers, lack of policies guidelines, high cost of sustainable construction materials, technologies, design of the construction project. In addition, the most effective barrier moving toward the sustainable construction practices is found to be difficulties in selection of sustainable construction materials. These results might be due to several reasons, including the lack of information provided for construction materials, respect to their sustainability, limited options for sustainable construction materials in the market, and resistance and reluctance to change the behavior of practitioners as customers. Furthermore, the results show that the effective barrier is the design of the construction project. This result might be due to the fact that the construction projects are designed according to technical requirements, specifications, and regulations. Thus, sustainability is not yet among the main concerns of engineers during the design phase. The results of this study will be beneficial to policymakers to understand the barriers to the transition of sustainable construction, and thus regulations and directives can be prepared to overcome these drawbacks. Thank you for listening.